Well, what are the primary reasons that we tell other people stories about our lives?
What are the primary reasons we tell people stories about our lives? First of all, it's varied, a lot of reasons. But I think the important thing you have to realize is that you do it almost every day. You will tell somebody something about your life. What happened to you in the morning, what happened to you yesterday. In other words, it's a primary way of connecting with people. It's just to tell them what happened in our lives. Even if someone says, how are you? Rather than saying, fine, say, I'm fine, except the other day, this is what happened. And then you have a little bit of your story. So the reason, getting back to your question, the reason we tell people stories about our lives are multiple. One is to connect. One is to be seen. Another is to actually hide. You can tell a story from your life and hide an aspect of yourself or the truth about yourself by telling another story. You can tell a story in your life to avoid what the conversation is about. You can tell a story in your life to get attention, to feel important. You can tell a story, part of a story of your life, to actually feel vulnerable and to get sympathy or empathy. So there's a wide range of reasons we sometimes intuitively, instinctively tell the stories from our life that tell what's going on. In fact, just before this interview, I won't go into them, but all of us, the four of us here, we're telling stories about our lives and what we've been through and what we're doing and all of that. And this happens all the time. But then you have to look at if you are intentionally telling a story. There's a story you are going to intentionally tell to one person, to a group of people, to 100 people, 1,000 people. Now you have to think about your question, actually, Karen. Why? Why am I telling this story? Now, if you want to tell a story and the story is fiction, you also have to ask yourself, why am I telling this story? But at the same time, you're also making up a story. You're creating a story. So there are two aspects of it. Why am I telling it? Which will affect what the story is and how I'm going to write it. But in autobiographical stories, that doesn't happen. Because there's something unique about an autobiographical stories like the ones you and I were discussing earlier. They have already been written, because they have already happened. There's nothing to create. The events you told, the events I told earlier, those have happened. Now you look at the story and there is a few big questions. I want to tell this story. The first thing is, you have way more information than you need. You have all the details of the story, whatever the event was, everything that happened to you, around you, what other people did, what other people said, whatever that event was, there's way more information than you probably want to tell or could include. So it's more now like making a documentary film. You have all this footage and you want to extract from that footage a smaller story. So now you have an event. What am I going to actually tell? But then you have to ask yourself, why am I telling this story? And this is where a lot of people struggle. Now, Elsa and I, when we're teaching our workshop on autobiographical storytelling called Write Your Life, one of the big things we deal with will have anywhere from 6 to 15 students. Each of them has an autobiographical story that they've already written, just a 3-minute story. And it's really interesting that a lot of them have no idea, which is totally understandable, why they picked that story. They picked the story on their own. We just say, pick an event, and they are not clear why. And that's fine. There's no problem with that. That's very normal. I don't know why. So now part of the struggle is to explore yourself and explore your experiences and to learn while you're working on the story, learn about the story, learn about yourself, and eventually learn why you picked that story. And there are some people we've worked with, when they start to realize why they really picked that story, sometimes they're horrified. Oh, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to reveal that. And all I can say is, well, you picked the story. And they realize they did, that there's something inside going on. And my belief is that with autobiographical storytelling, there's an inner voice that's even helping you pick the story. So if you're going to meet with somebody, maybe for a job or a date or whatever, and you want to tell them something about yourself and say, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll tell him or her this story about what happened to me, because it's really a great story. Do you know why you picked that story? Are you clear? And this all comes way before the question of how do you want the listener to receive the story? What do you want the listener to get from the story? How do you want the listener to see you as the storyteller, or even to see you as the person in the story? And all of that is open, and all of that is malleable even without changing the story. So the question now becomes, how do I tell the story so that I can project myself, present myself the way I want to? And how can I tell it so that the listener will receive the story the way I want them to receive it?
Do you think people change their story, and it's maybe just by omission, by the way they're reading the room? Maybe they can tell either the room is welcoming or maybe it's not so welcoming. Mm-hmm. So they don't feel comfortable sharing certain aspects of their lives because there's an elephant in the room. They're not sure what it is. But then they leave out certain details because they don't want to offend, or maybe they realize it won't be met with the same reception as if they were in another setting.
Yes. Now, your question, Karen, was about, do they change it? I mean, in the process of telling it, or now are you talking about a stage presentation, like a solo show or something like that, or a speech, or a TED Talk?
Sure.
It's possible. It's very, very, very possible. It's very possible with the most skilled storytellers. They can change it in a heartbeat because they can tell a part of the story and get a reaction that tells them, oh, okay, I need to make a shift. I need to make an adjustment and go in a different direction because that's being received negatively or being misinterpreted. And so I'm going to have to clear that up, and I'll sometimes shift to another story, or tell the story in a different way, or reveal something different within the story than I had intended. I had intended to reveal this aspect of my character or my experience in the story. I'm going to shift that to something else, and they can do it within the telling of the story. I have one small story, not an autobiographical story, but I was working actually with Val Kilmer many years ago on his portrayal of Mark Twain. Now he's not doing an autobiographical piece at all, but he's doing Mark Twain telling Mark Twain stories. So it's Mark Twain telling stories. And we were talking a lot about Hal Holbrook, who he admired a lot, who has a whole career doing Mark Twain. And one thing I didn't know that Val told me was that Mark Twain had 17 different shows he could do, all Mark Twain material that he had researched and explored. There's so much material about Mark Twain and he would get a booking. He would say, okay, you're going to do this we want you to perform in New York. And based on the fact that it's New York, he would select certain material. You're going to do it in New York for this organization. He'd do research on the organization, and from all the wide range of material he would have, he would construct a different show specifically for them. If he was doing the South, it was a whole different show. So I think the whole thing of autobiographical storytelling, I think by instinct, when we're just having a conversation like you and I are, and we're telling a story, by instinct we will change. If we're not getting the reaction we want, we will shift. I know there are times I've started to tell a story in a group and it got a little interrupted at one point, and this happened to me just a few weeks ago, and I went, that's it, my story's done. I know there's no point in finishing the story. I could feel that the energy and the interest of the people was somewhere else, and there was no point. So I just stopped. So you can do that. So I think there is, that's very important. It's a great question because we are telling our own stories. We're actually revealing something about ourselves rather than someone asking me, what's your screenplay about? And I tell them that story. Well, that's not an autobiographical story at all. That's a fiction story. And I'll stick to whatever the story is and hope that they like it. But when I'm telling an autobiographical story, I'm actually revealing bits and pieces of me, one little piece after another, after another, after another. And I know the times that I've done some rather long stories, totally improvised, long autobiographical stories about my experiences in Hollywood and things like that, and it's been a speech that I've agreed to do, I will shift and change the tone of it, even based on the reactions. And sometimes the reaction is I'll say something and I hear a reaction that I wasn't expecting, which means they know exactly what I'm saying. This is it's an inside joke. They got it. Okay, then I will keep going in that direction because that is supporting what I want to reveal.
Do you think there are regional autobiographical stories? So let's say someone in LA may tell an autobiographical story that's more career-based, whereas in some small town in another part of the US, it might be more about their family and how long their families had the land or something. I don't know, I'm just generalizing here, but I was wondering, is autobiographical storytelling more regional-based? In
terms of the people who act, now you're talking about who are doing it more or less professionally, you mean?
I guess in what we select to reveal or leave out.
Well, again, I'm going to take your two examples. You have the LA story, which you said is career-based or industry-based or whatever, and somewhere in the Midwest it's more about family. My belief is, and I'm pretty sure I'm right, the audience in LA would rather hear the family story. The audience in the Midwest would rather hear the industry story.
Interesting.
In other words, because to do a story, a lot of stories about the industry in LA, we go, I've heard that, I lived that, that's nothing new. But for someone to be telling about being raised in Arkansas, and working on a farm, I go, I want to hear that because that is not part of my experience. I want that experience. I want to learn from that. So again, that's judging the audience, assessing the audience, and will what I am talking about resonate with them in some way, or will it offend them in some way? If you do a one-person show in LA about the struggles of becoming a famous actress, most people won't go. I think we know that story. We've heard that story so many times.
Well, Judy, the movie Judy, though, because you're seeing another side of it, which is
another side,
the happy-go-lucky side of what most people probably want to project.
Yeah,
they'll go for that one.
Yeah.
But I think that's because that person's revealing. Renee Zellweger's character was revealing these demons that we don't always get access.
Yeah, and she's revealing the demons within a very famous icon that we know, and so we want to know more. And you're right, that film shows us more about who Judy really was and less about her career. I mean, her career is in there, but it's more about the demons she was struggling with, which is fascinating.
She did an excellent job.
Yeah.